brother sitting a few blocks up from where we are in the Oval Office. He's the leader of the free world, as they say. Jonathan McBride will hopefully tell us a little bit more about what that really means and the challenges and triumphs that our president is facing. But a few days after performing at our president's inauguration, 15-year-old Haida Pemberton was shot dead in a Chicago park by a bullet meant for someone else. Most likely, another one of our children. Months later, the verdict was released, and George Zimmerman, as we talked about earlier, was found not guilty of any crime after the shooting death of 15-year-old Trayvon Martin. As mothers, as aunts, as little sisters, as big sisters, what was your reaction that evening as you watched the verdict being read on the news? What was your reaction when you came back to the office the next morning? As corporate counsel, as the sole or one of the very few Brown attorneys in the room, when, if there dare have been a dialogue around the stand your ground law and what this law really means in practice, and how it was that the jury, chock full of mothers, said that the law and the jury instructions instructed them to issue the verdict that they did. Were you conflicted? Were you mad? Were you just sad? Did you hold your son, your nephew, your brother, your father just a little tighter that night? I know I did. And although the fact pattern is very different, the tenderness of the dialogue in the aftermath of the O.J. Simpson verdict bore forth many of the same dichotomies, schizophrenia, imbalance for many of us as attorneys of color, but also as mothers, sisters, and aunts. Yes, there's been progress, but there's still so much to do. And then only last week, near Charlotte, North Carolina, a 24-year-old, yes, he was big, and he was black, but Jonathan Farrell was also an ex-Florida A&M collegiate football player, so he was going to be big. He was hurt, apparently badly, from a car accident, and was most likely terrified himself. He climbed out the back window of his totaled car and limped up the street and started banging on a woman's door in the middle of the night. He scared her. Yes, she was also terrified. But when the police came to her aid, and this child, remember my son's 22, ran to them, when he ran to the police in fear, how did the officer respond? By taking out his revolver and shooting him in the chest 4 or 5 times until he was dead in the street. We are all familiar with the number of brown boys, brown and tan boys, that we have warehoused in jails and prisons throughout the country. But I know that you know that it continues to grow, and it's an embarrassment and a national tragedy. The cradle to prison pipeline just has to end. We need to do what we can nationally to fix on the front end what I believe is the root cause of all these societal dysfunctions. Starting with the repairing of our public school system, which is failing miserably our children. And what about our federal bench? And why and how is it that in 2013, the numbers of judges of color remain so anemic? And bringing it even closer to home, how about the number of equity partners of the firms that are sitting in this very room that do our work? When is that dynamic going to change? Progress is being made, of course. After all, 3,000 CCWC members. But there's still so very much for us to do. Now, girls, are you aware that 1 out of every 3 women globally would have suffered domestic abuse at the hands of a man during her lifetime? And that's 25% within the United States, ladies. 25%. The vastness of this global epidemic reinforces the urgency that we continue to educate our communities on how to recognize domestic violence and help victims achieve freedom, education, and security. And there's more. You have stories, but this is why organizations such as CCWC, bringing us all together in this environment to share, to learn, to connect, to strategize, to help, is so crucial. This is why it's so very important for us as women of color, as attorneys of color, because we all are in positions of power, no matter where you are in your organization. You need to influence, to speak up, to speak out. And it's what's so empowering is that we have so many different avenues at our disposal to actually make a difference. You heard about Joy's story with Dress for Success, the importance of philanthropy. And what I know that I am in a room full of women who are already very engaged in their communities and within the corporations. But what I ask of you is to sort of stretch what it is that you do personally and bring others along on your mission. I'm going to very quickly tell you a quick Verizon story, which I think would help sort of round this out. Verizon has always been very focused in the community. We value community involvement, and frankly, it's always been part of our brand. We're very consumer-oriented. We needed and wanted to be near those people who purchase our services, clearly. But within the legal department, which was separate from the public policy department, legal as a whole was simply not as connected as we needed to be in the community. Of course, there were individual attorneys, like many of us in here, who did their part on their own. But there were so many that knew there had to be more to practicing law than negotiating a multi-million-dollar telecommunications contract or debating